The moment Marcus stepped into the luxury boutique, he could feel the stares. You know that feeling? When you walk into a place and people act like you don't belong? Yeah, that. He wasn't new to it, but something about today felt different. The air was thick with judgment, like an unspoken rule had just been broken. He could see the sleek glass shelves lined with designer bags, the soft golden lighting that made everything feel expensive, and the customers, mostly wealthy, mostly white, browsing as if they were the only ones allowed to be there. Marcus was dressed sharp, too. Black tailored suit, polished shoes, fresh cut, everything on point. But still, the moment he walked in, the store owner, a middle-aged man with slicked back hair and a smug smirk, narrowed his eyes like he had already decided something about him. "Can I help you?" The tone wasn't welcoming. It was laced with something else. Suspicion. Marcus smiled, keeping it cool. Just looking around. The owner's lip curled slightly, as if the words annoyed him. "We don't have anything in here for you." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? I think you should leave." The owner's voice was firmer now, and suddenly it felt like the entire store was watching. A couple near the jewelry counter glanced over. A saleswoman in a crisp white blouse hesitated, gripping the edge of a display stand. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest, but he stayed calm. "I'm a paying customer. I have every right to be here." The owner scoffed. "People like you don't shop here. People like you." There it was, not even trying to hide it. Marcus could feel the anger bubbling, but he wasn't about to give this man the satisfaction. Instead, he nodded slowly, as if he had just confirmed something important. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. But here's the thing. What the owner didn't know. Marcus wasn't just some random guy off the street. He was on a mission. And this was only the beginning. Because the very next day, karma was about to pay a visit, one the owner would never see coming. The night after Marcus was kicked out of that store, he couldn't shake the feeling. It sat in his chest like a weight, pressing down on him. He had experienced racism before, too many times to count, but something about this moment felt personal. Maybe it was the arrogance in the owner's eyes, the way he dismissed him, like he wasn't even worth the air in that store. Maybe it was how nobody said a word, not the customers, not the employees, just silence, like they all agreed he didn't belong. Marcus sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, his mind racing. He could have caused a scene, could have called him out right there. But what would that have done? Made him look like the problem? Given the owner exactly what he wanted? No. That wasn't Marcus. He wasn't about to fight a battle on someone else's terms. He had a different plan. See, what the store owner didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just some regular customer. He was a successful entrepreneur, built his business from the ground up. He had money. More than enough to buy anything in that store 10 times over. But more importantly, he had connections, the kind that could make or break a place like that. And tomorrow, the owner was going to find out exactly who he messed with. The next morning, Marcus made a few calls. He had friends in high places, people who understood the power of influence. Some of them were in business, others in media. He told them what happened, how the owner of that boutique had treated him, and let's just say, word traveled fast. But Marcus wasn't done. He had one more move to make, a personal one. Later that afternoon, he walked into his office, sat at his desk, and opened his laptop. He pulled up the store's website, scrolled through their products, and shook his head. The prices were insane, but that wasn't surprising. What did surprise him, though, was how they marketed themselves. Luxury with integrity. That's what the homepage said. Integrity? Now that was funny. Marcus smirked to himself, then started typing. A post, a simple, honest story about what had happened to him. Nothing exaggerated, no lies, just the truth. He didn't even mention the store's name. He didn't have to. The right people would know exactly who he was talking about. By the time he hit post, he already knew what was coming. It didn't take long. Within hours, his story had spread like wildfire. Comments poured in. Some people were outraged, some weren't surprised, and some shared their own stories of being treated differently in high-end stores. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was bigger than that. And while all this was happening, Marcus was preparing for his next move, because tomorrow he was going back to that store. But this time, he wasn't going alone. The next morning, Marcus woke up early, but he barely got any sleep. His phone had been buzzing all night, texts, notifications, calls from people who saw his post. Some were furious, others just disappointed, but not surprised. And then there were the messages from people who had been through the same thing, turned away, ignored, treated like they didn't belong just because of how they looked. Marcus stared at his phone for a moment, then took a deep breath. Today was the day. He had no idea how it was going to play out, but one thing was certain. He wasn't walking into that store alone this time. By noon, Marcus pulled up in front of the boutique, but he wasn't the only one. A few high-profile friends had shown up, people with real influence, CEOs, athletes, even a well-known actor. All of them had seen what happened, and all of them wanted to make a point. They weren't here to argue, to fight, or cause a scene. They were just here to do one thing: shop. The moment they stepped inside, the energy in the store shifted. The same golden lighting, the same overpriced shelves, but now there was tension in the air. The employees who had ignored him the day before suddenly looked nervous. The customers glanced over, trying to act like they weren't watching. But Marcus wasn't paying attention to them. His eyes were locked on one person: the owner. And there he was, standing behind the counter, his face shifting from confusion to something else: panic. Marcus walked up to him, slow, deliberate. "Morning," he said, voice calm. The owner swallowed, forcing a tight smile. Oh, welcome back." His tone was different this time, forced, like he knew something was up but wasn't sure what to do. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, figured I'd give this place another shot. You don't mind, do you?" The owner hesitated. "Of course not. Please take your time." Marcus could hear it in his voice. He was scrambling, trying to decide how to play this. The day before, he had no problem kicking Marcus out, treating him like he didn't matter. But now Marcus wasn't just another customer. Now he was someone who could make people pay attention. And the best part, he still hadn't said a word about what happened. The group spread out, browsing, asking questions, making sure every employee was on their best behavior. The tension in the room was thick, but Marcus acted like he didn't notice. He picked up a designer watch, admired it for a second, then looked at the owner. "What do you think? Worth it?" The owner's smile was tight. "It's one of our best pieces." Marcus nodded, setting it down. Good to know. It was almost funny watching the man squirm. But Marcus wasn't here for that. He was here to make a statement, without ever raising his voice, without ever pointing fingers. Just by being here, by existing in this space, he had already done enough. And then, just when he thought the owner couldn't get more uncomfortable, the door swung open again. A woman stepped inside, mid-40s, confident stride, dressed like she ran the world. And maybe she did, because the second the owner saw her, his entire face changed. Fear. Pure, unmistakable fear. Marcus turned slightly, watching the interaction. He had never seen this woman before, but judging by the way the owner stiffened up, she was important. She walked right up to the counter, her voice sharp. "We need to talk." The owner swallowed hard. "Of course, ma'am. Let's step into my office." Marcus exchanged a glance with one of his friends. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't going to be good for the owner. And that was exactly the kind of karma he deserved. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Because Marcus still had one more move to make. And when he did, the owner would never forget it. The store felt different now. The air was thick with tension, heavy like a storm was about to hit. The employees were still pretending to be busy, but their hands moved slower, their eyes darting toward the owner every few seconds. The customers, some pretending not to notice, others openly staring, could feel it too. Something was happening. And whatever it wasn't good for the man who had kicked Marcus out just yesterday. Marcus stayed quiet, watching as the owner led the woman toward his office. The way his shoulders were stiff, the nervous way he glanced back, he knew. He knew exactly why she was here, and he knew he couldn't talk his way out of it. As soon as the office door shut behind them, a woman from Marcus's group leaned in. "Who is she?" she whispered. "No idea," Marcus murmured, still watching. "But whoever she is, she's got him scared." They weren't the only ones paying attention. The tension in the store was growing by the second. The employees weren't smiling anymore. A few had gone completely still, just listening. A couple of customers grabbed their bags and quietly slipped out, like they didn't want to be anywhere near whatever was about to go down. Then, muffled voices. At first, low, controlled. Then sharper. The woman was speaking fast, her words short and clipped. The owner's voice was harder to make out, but it was different from before. No longer arrogant, no longer smug. Defensive. Pleading. The door was thick, but not thick enough. A single sentence cut through, clear as day. You have no idea what you've done. The whole store went silent. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. That wasn't just a business conversation, that was something bigger. And then, bam, bam, the office door flew open, and the woman stormed out, her heels clicking against the floor with every step. Her face was tight, her jaw locked. She didn't look back, didn't say another word, just walked straight to the exit. The owner stood frozen in the doorway, his face pale, his hands gripping the frame like it was the only thing holding him up. Whatever had just happened in that office, it had drained the fight right out of him. Marcus took a step forward. Everything all right? The owner blinked, as if realizing Marcus was still there. For a moment, it looked like he might try to answer, might try to salvage whatever dignity he had left. But then, he just shook his head. Marcus watched him for a beat, then nodded slowly. Yeah, he said, voice calm. Didn't think so. He turned, motioning to his friends, and just like that, they walked out. No shouting, no scene, just a quiet, undeniable statement. But Marcus knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because whatever just happened in that office, that was only the beginning. Marcus stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face as he adjusted his jacket. His friends followed, silent but exchanging looks, all of them sensing the same thing. This wasn't over. Not yet. As they reached the curb, one of them finally spoke. Man, did you see his face? The disbelief was clear in his voice. Whatever she said in there, that dude is done. Marcus nodded, but his mind was still turning. The woman, who was she? A business partner? Someone higher up? The way the owner reacted, it wasn't just a warning. It was something deeper, something that rattled him to his core. Then, just as he was about to unlock his car, his phone buzzed. A notification. No, several. More than several. His inbox was flooded. Texts, emails, missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize. And then one message caught his eye. You're going to want to see this. It was a link. Marcus clicked it, and the moment the page loaded, his stomach dropped. A video. The boutique. The owner. The whole ugly scene from the day before, caught on camera. Someone had recorded the entire thing. The dismissive tone. The way the owner looked him up and down like he didn't belong. The exact moment he told Marcus to leave. And now it was everywhere. Marcus scrolled down, thousands of comments. People calling out the store, tagging news outlets, influencers weighing in. And at the very top, one comment stood out. Isn't this the same guy who got caught up in that scandal last year? Marcus frowned. What scandal? He tapped on the comment, and within seconds, another article popped up. His eyes scanned the headline. Then, the breath in his chest tightened. It wasn't just about the owner being racist. It was bigger than that. Fraud, lawsuits, shady business practices. This guy had been on thin ice for a long time. And now, with this video spreading like wildfire, that ice was cracking, fast. Before Marcus could even process it, his phone rang, a familiar voice on the other end. Yo, you seeing this? Marcus exhaled, rubbing his jaw. Yeah, I'm seeing it. His friend let out a low whistle. Man, you didn't even have to do anything. This dude's whole life is falling apart on its own. Marcus didn't say anything, because deep down, he knew. This wasn't just karma. This was something bigger, something inevitable, and somehow, he had a feeling this wasn't even the worst of it yet. Marcus stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding. The video had spread faster than he could have imagined. It was on every social media platform, getting picked up by news outlets, and the comments were ruthless. People were demanding answers. Some were boycotting the store. Others were digging deeper, pulling up every shady business deal, every bad review, every lawsuit the owner had ever been involved in. And the craziest part? Marcus hadn't planned any of this. He hadn't needed to. The truth had a way of exposing itself. Then another call came in. Unknown number. Marcus hesitated, then answered. Hello? A pause. Then a voice, low, tense. I need to speak with you. It took Marcus a second to place it, but when he did, his eyes widened. It was him, the owner. Marcus exchanged a look with his friends before stepping away from the group. I'm listening. A shaky breath on the other end. Look, I messed up, okay? The man's voice was nothing like before. Gone was the arrogance, the entitlement. Now there was something else. Fear, desperation. I didn't know who you were. If I had. Marcus let out a short laugh. If you had known I had money, if you had known I had connections, then I'd be welcome in your store? The man stammered. That's not what I meant. But that's exactly what you're saying, Marcus cut in, his voice calm but firm. You didn't have a problem with me. You had a problem with who you thought I was. Silence. Then the man sighed heavily. Look, I'm losing everything. My investors are pulling out, customers are canceling orders, my own employees won't even look me in the eye. I need to fix this. His voice wavered. Tell me what I have to do. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down, the way everything had flipped in just 24 hours. Finally, he exhaled. This isn't about me, he said. It never was. The man inhaled sharply, but Marcus wasn't done. You can't fix this with an apology. You don't get to undo years of treating people like they don't belong just because it's affecting your bottom line. This is bigger than one bad day, one bad moment. You have to live with this. The line went silent again. Then, so quietly it was almost a whisper, the man muttered, I already am. Marcus didn't say another word. He simply hung up. As he turned back to his friends, one of them raised a brow. So? Marcus slipped his phone into his pocket, shaking his head. He's done? And he was. The next morning, headlines confirmed it. The boutique had officially closed its doors. Investors had pulled out completely. The business was bankrupt. But the final twist? A new owner had already stepped in. Someone with a vision for a different kind of store. A store where everyone was welcome. And when Marcus saw the name of the person taking over, he couldn't help but smile. It was the woman from the office. She had been the true power all along. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, coffee in hand, scrolling through the latest news. The boutique's closure had become a major story, but what really caught his eye was the woman who had taken over. Her name was Vanessa Carter, a powerhouse in the fashion industry, known for pushing boundaries and standing for inclusivity. No wonder the owner had been so terrified when she walked into that office. She wasn't just a business partner. She was the business partner. And the moment she saw how he ran things, she made a decision. Marcus smirked, shaking his head. Karma worked fast sometimes. His phone buzzed, and he glanced down. Another message from an unknown number. But this time, it wasn't from the old owner. Would love to connect. Let's talk soon, Vanessa Carter. Marcus raised a brow. That was unexpected. He took a sip of his coffee, debating his next move. He hadn't done any of this for attention, hadn't even planned for it to go this far. But now someone who actually had the power to make change wanted to talk. Before he could respond, his best friend Devin called. Marcus answered with a grin. Man, you still keeping up with all this? Devin laughed. Keeping up, bro. You're everywhere. You might as well start a podcast at this point. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. Not happening. Nah, but for real, Devin said, his tone softening. You did something big, man. You didn't have to say much, didn't have to fight or go off. You just existed, and that was enough to shake up the whole system. Marcus leaned back in his chair, letting those words sink in. He hadn't thought about it that way, but Devin was right. He hadn't planned revenge, hadn't tried to ruin anyone. He had simply stood his ground, and the truth, that had been more powerful than anything else. So, Devin continued, what's next? Marcus exhaled, glancing at Vanessa's message again. Not sure yet, he admitted, but something tells me this isn't the end of the story. And deep down, he knew. It never really was.